Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Main Thing. I'm your host, Noah Cracknell. On this week's episode, it's just going to be me today. And I am going to go through a document that I came across as I was moving out of my apartment. And document, I will provide pictures to it in the link to this podcast, and videos will also be on YouTube. But the kind of tagline at the top of it is level one requirements for health and wellness. And we go through food choices, eating behaviors, recovery, life skills, mindset slash psychology, and environment. And kind of the take home message for this is the goal is to have 75% of what we talk about on today's episode mastered and be able to do 90% of the time without much trouble. So being able to do all these different things 90% of the time easily. And I really liked it because a lot of the stuff that I kind of preach about in general are on this document. And I actually can't think about where I initially came across it. But what we're going to do today is go through each category. I'm just going to say what it says and then provide some of my thoughts, and we'll transition to the next category and so on. And then at the end, we'll kind of conclude, and that will be this week's episode. The main thing, I had to reschedule my guest this week due to some technical difficulties, but look forward to having Anna on the show soon. And I think that'll be a really fun episode for everyone. So, to kick things off, level one requirements for health and wellness. First bullet that we're going to talk about is food choices. And under this bullet of food choices, there are a few things, and I'm just going to list them out and then we'll kind of go back and walk through them. First is eating a few processed foods, followed by eating plenty of nutritious, whole, minimally processed foods, meeting basic nutrient needs, staying hydrated, rarely drinking sugar sweetened drinks, drinking alcohol rarely or moderately, and feeling satisfied by their meals. So, this is obviously a big component of health and wellness and well being. And the eating a few processed foods in combination with eating plenty of nutritious, whole, minimally processed foods, I think go hand in hand. One tool that I use on a regular basis to help me kind of identify processed foods, and if I am going to have a processed food, what to look for in the ingredients list so that I'm not harming myself and not having an overly processed food or beverage. So obviously we want to eat as few processed foods as we can. One of the biggest suggestions that I tell people when they're trying to make a diet change is to simply just eat whole foods. And if you can do that, you are going to radically change your diet for the most part. And if you're already eating whole foods, then you're like 99% of the way there. That's the first key, is eating predominantly whole foods. And kind of the underlying assumptions that go with eating whole foods is that you're probably going to have to cook every meal, which is a lot different for most people in America. Most people don't cook every meal. And so that requires using whole ingredients, right? So that requires going to the grocery store, getting foods, perishable foods most of the time, because most whole foods are perishable, and cooking. And that can be a bit challenging for a lot of people. But that is the first step to really radically changing your diet and kind of way you approach food. Now, the things that we want to look out for on the nutrition labels, minimally processed foods. So when I look at, say, like I like to have a protein bar every once in a while. And when I'm having a protein bar, there are some things that I just will not consume. Those tend to be canola oil, sunflower oil, any highly processed oil, vegetable oil specifically. So what oils we want to look for are, extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil. Those tend to be better for you, cause less inflammation. And so those are some things that I stay away right off the bat. Others include MSG, lots of added sugar, and then kind of just a guideline in general for when you're looking at food, especially processed food, is okay, can I pronounce all the ingredients? Did I see the ingredients somewhere in my chemistry class in elementary school or middle school or high school? And if you can do that, it's probably going to be a safer option than most alternatives. So, for example, if we were to take like a Doritos chip, I bet you that you cannot name the majority of the ingredients that go into a Doritos chip. Whereas if you were to look at, say, sourdough bread, you could, name all the ingredients on sourdough bread and enunciate them correctly. And so that in combination with how long the list is. Okay, so if you can read all the ingredients on the list and the list is short, you're likely in the clear. If you cannot read all the ingredients and the list is very long, best probably to stay away and look for alternative there. So those are my thoughts on minimally processed foods and nutritious foods. Now, meeting basic nutrient needs is obviously important, but what most people don't know is what are your nutrition or nutrient needs. And identifying those is a challenge, and it's hard for me to say on the podcast like what is the best thing for everyone, because frankly I don't know you, and I don't know what nutritional strategy is the best intervention to meet your nutrient needs. So what I would suggest is, one thing that I've done is I've gotten a blood test. And the thing about blood tests is it gives you real physiological data that you can base your intervention off of. You can anchor your intervention to this data. And when I got my last blood test, it showed me that I was clinically deficient in vitamin D, which, you may not say is a nutrient per se, but vitamin D is an essential vitamin that you need every single day. And I started supplementing with vitamin D, and it's really kind of changed my life. Honestly, like I feel way better. My skin's cleared up because of it. I have more energy. I wake up and I actually like, I don't know, like I'm a lot more alert. Which, if you know me, I'm already like pretty wired when I wake up to begin with. So that was like pretty noticeable for me. And so when you're thinking about what your nutrient needs are, I would just ask, like, what is your desirable health outcome? And then base your nutrient needs off that question, off the answer to that question. But really, the best piece of advice is get your blood tested, see where you're deficient in vitamins and minerals, see where your blood glucose level is, and talk to a nutritional professional, a registered dietitian or a nutritionist, and talk to them, ask a ton of questions, because they may have a predetermined framework for how they go about handling clients. But the best way to get insight about your personal nutrient needs is to ask them questions. Ask them a ton of questions, because they'll give you great feedback if you're asking them questions about your life. Transitioning to now staying hydrated. Staying hydrated is obviously very important. Our body is predominantly water. You need water to survive. And there's a couple strategies that I have in place that I kind of like utilize on a day-to-day basis. The first is getting some form of electrolyte in. So no matter the day, I'm either consuming a electrolyte supplement, or having some Himalayan pink salt in my water in the morning. Just trying to get some electrolytes in me. Now, specifically for water intake, there's a wide range of suggestions. I would just say you probably need, it depends on your body weight, obviously, and how big you are. I would say drink enough water to the point where you're not feeling thirsty, and don't try and drink too much. The I have probably about 120 ounces a day, and that feels really comfortable for me. And then especially when you're working out, so all the athletes, super important to supplement with water and replace the fluid that you lost during exercise, or if you're doing any form of sauna or long endurance event, that becomes essential. So Gatorade, electrolytes, water, very important when you're working out and exerting yourself. Now, rarely drinking sugar sweetened drinks. Oh boy, this is a big one. So I can't, obviously, I'm not trying to stand up here and act like I've done everything right. I've learned a lot about my mistakes. And one of the things that I've noticed over the course of the last 3 years is that, uh, I've over the course of the last 3 years, I've gone out and had, like an alcoholic beverage that is loaded with sugar. Now, there's some ways to limit that I'm going to tell you about. And then also, like, soda is just no longer a part of my life, mainly because if we go back to the suggestions for the minimally processed foods, if you look at a soda's label, a lot of the time there's a lot of added sugar. And I would just love for you guys to do a little experiment for me. The next time you think about having a soda, before you have a soda, I want you to think, or I want you to look at how many sugars are in that can, how many grams of sugar are in that can. Then what I want you to do is go to the store, get sugar if you don't have it. Once you get a scale, if you have a scale, a food scale, and I want you to pour out how many grams of sugar that is so you can see it. And once you can see it, I want you to hold it in both hands because it's going to take both hands for you to like hold it. And I just want you to think about that the next time that you have a soda. That's going into your body, and your body's forced to metabolize and digest that. A little thought experiment for you, not suggesting whether you should or should not have soda, just a thought experiment and an exercise that you can do maybe the next time you're thinking about having a soda. Alternatives to soda that I really love: LaCroix. I really like sparkling water. I found them to be like sweet enough where it's like not, it's kind of like curing my sweetness craving. And they're good. They're great. I love LaCroix. And then for alcoholic beverages, some things to consider. If you have let's just call it a Jack and Coke. So you're getting a serving of alcohol, which can have anywhere from 100 to 200 calories. And then you're getting, say, a half serving of Coke. And so you're probably getting 23 grams of sugar in that half serving of Coke. Let's just estimate 23 grams of sugar. That probably has anywhere from an additional 150, 250, no, sorry, 75 to 150 calories. That one beverage, you're looking at anywhere from like 200 to at the most 400 calories per mixed drink. Now, that's a lot. And what you don't realize is that alcohol plus sugar uh, is a nightmare for your body to metabolize. And that is potentially not so good for your health. It's not good for your health. And there are some ways that I've thought about consuming alcohol that may be a little bit more advantageous to your desirable health outcomes. So, for example, for me, one of my pillars is to live well in 3 centuries. That's one of my desirable health outcomes. And if I were to break that down, that means reducing the amount of sugar that I have on a daily basis is one tool that I deploy. And so if I do consume alcohol, and we'll get to alcohol in a second, I don't really consume alcohol too much, probably less than 2 days a week, if that, where I'll have like a drink. And if I do have a mixed drink, I am going for a all natural beverage preferred. And if I am having a mixed drink, I will have it either with like a diet soda or just sparkling water or tonic water, although tonic water is not so great, or just soda water, right? So like a vodka soda is a lot better than like a vodka with whatever, a vodka Sprite or a vodka crayon, where you have all these additional sugars in it. And that's what really hurts you the next morning and in the long term. So my suggestions on sweetened drinks: one, try and not have them. And then if you are considering having a very sugar sweetened drink, consider weighing out the amount of grams of sugar it is in like real life, like get a scale, get the sugar, measure it out, look at it, tell me, do you want that much sugar entering your bloodstream in your body and forcing your body to metabolize that? I reckon the answer would likely be no. Good exercise for just illustrating how much sugar that you're having when you have one of those drinks. And then secondly, replacing your vodka cran or your Jack and Coke with a soda water or some form of alternate caloric beverage like a diet product is a intervention that you can deploy that's more aligned with say your desirable health outcome, more aligned at least with my desirable health outcome of living longer. And believe me, I am no master. Like I'm kind of up here preaching a little bit, but I struggled with this greatly. Like when I was living in my college house, it was like, yeah, like I would have a Jack and Coke or whatever, and the next morning I would wake up and my face would be all puffy and I hated it. And so I learned from it. And that's all that I'm really suggesting is, look at what you're consuming. And if you have these desirable health outcomes, potentially deploy these interventions where you can and take note of the effects and then retest, revise, and revisit. So the second one, feeling satisfied by their meals. The next one, feeling satisfied by their meals. This is a practice that I've been working on a lot. And, just talking generally about my relationship with food, it's like I've come from a place where it's like it was always more is better, I feel like. And just being an athlete, like you always want to get in as much food as you can. And for my younger athletes listening who are in middle school, high school, who are looking to grow, that suggestion is probably pretty good. Now, for those people that are, closer to my age and not elite athletes and are not exerting themselves strenuously on a daily basis, that's not such great advice. So, as I transitioned away from being like an elite athlete, I'd still consider, I train like 8 hours a week. So, I'd say that I'm training a lot and I need to replace a lot of my calories. But one of the things that I've been practicing is this Japanese practice that I got from Blue Zones. It's called Araachi Bu, which essentially translates to eat till you're 80% full. And this strategy has been really beneficial for me because I have a tendency to eat until I'm full, which is different from eating till you're 80% full. Because what happens, ghrelin, the hormone that or leptin, when you are hungry, I believe it's leptin. I could be mixing my terms up, but essentially, when you're full, leptin is high and you no longer are hungry, right? But that process to raise the leptin or ghrelin levels, I'm getting the molecules mixed up, takes about 20 to 30 minutes for it to kick in. So if you eat till you're full, you're actually consuming a lot more than your body needs, and you're not necessarily listening to your body. That's one thing that I've been working on. And so a simple practice that I've been trying to deploy is eating till I'm 80% full. And most of the time it's, I'll eat and I'll wait 20 minutes and I'm full and I'm satisfied and I feel great and I feel light, I feel agile, and I don't really crash, which is a big one. And that is very hard for me because I've had this relationship with food where it's always been more is better because I'm constantly exerting myself in exercise and in life. And so dialing that back has been a very hard process, but one worth practicing. Again, back to my desirable health outcomes, I can only speak from my point of view. One of my pillars is to live in 3 centuries. In order to do that, I need to, monitor the amount of calories that I take in, because one of the, things in longevity that people are talking about, doctors are talking about, scientists are, caloric restriction. And it appears that some form of caloric restriction is needed to lengthen life. And you obviously can do your due diligence on researching that, but that is one aspect that I've been working on by feeling satisfied with my meals is Araachi Bu. You can look it up. eat till you're 80% full, and then wait 20 30 minutes, and you can figure it out from there if you need to eat more or if you feel satisfied. Eating behaviors, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this one because it's kind of a lot of things that we've already talked about. Eating slowly and mindfully. Oh my gosh. So I'm a really quick eater. I like to be efficient. So and efficient generally means fast for me, which is not the two terms are not always should be combined together. But eating slowly and mindfully is a part of this Arachibu practice where I'm trying to like chew more, and this helps with the digestion process, and overall it's going to make you feel better. So potentially the takeaways from food choices and eating behaviors that I'm going to talk about are: let's eat whole foods for the most part. If we are consuming processed foods, let's think about what's on the nutrition label. If the label has words that you cannot pronounce, and the list is very long, probably stay away from it. However, if you can pronounce the words on the ingredients list and it's shorter, you're likely in the clear. Third is Arachibu, eat till you're about 80% full. And then fourth, I would say eat slowly and mindfully. And that means chewing your food for me, because I have a tendency to rush through that process and really enjoy it. Those are the four things that I would suggest on food choices and eating behaviors. So I think now we can segue a little bit and transition to the next bullet, which is recovery. Recovery is interesting. The one of the things that I preach to my younger high school athletes and clients in general is that we do a lot of work in the weight room. We do a lot of work. We strain the body, we strain the muscle. And I always tell them, I'm like, look, guys, we are straining your body right now. And the only way for it to rebuild itself and become stronger is if you crush the rest, if you crush sleep, if you crush recovery. And so I tell them, I'm like, guys, gains don't happen in the weight room, when in reality they do. Gains really happen when you're recovering. And that's in essence where the gains really start to come to life, right? So the first sub bullet point of recovery is getting enough sleep. And my thoughts on this are, it's kind of like a very extensive topic. And if you want to dive into it, you can. Dr. Huberman, Huberman Lab on all social media platforms, has a great podcast with Matt Walker, who's a sleep researcher scientist at University of California, Berkeley. Any Matt Walker podcast is amazing, and I suggest you listen to them, take notes, and try and learn from all their brilliance, because they talk about sleep and you can really dive into the weeds on it. But the one quote that I remember from Matt Walker's book is, wakefulness is low-level brain damage, sleep is neurological sanitation. And when I read that, I was like, I circled it, I underlined it, I starred it, I made a note of it. Like, that resonated with me so much, because I really like enjoy my sleep, and in order to function and do everything that I do on a daily basis, which is a ton of stuff, I have to get my sleep. So wakefulness is low level brain damage. That's saying when you are awake, you are creating low level brain damage by living. When you're sleeping, you are recovering. So sleep is neurological sanitation. You are scrubbing, making the brain clear, work better, facilitate thoughts and actions better. And it's just, that quote really put sleep into perspective for me about how important it is. Again, what does sleep mean for you? I don't know. I would suggest, if you're struggling with sleep, really dig into Dr. Huberman's work, Matt Walker's work. They have a link to, Dr. Huberman has a link to his supplement stack routine. He calls it his nighttime cocktail. of supplements to help him induce the transition to sleep and sleep better. That would be a potential resource that you could check out. I will leave a link to that in the description to this podcast and video. And notes on sleep, some things that I think about if you're looking to improve sleep. One, get light in your eyes early in the day before 11 a.m. So when when the light is coming up over the horizon, when the sun is below 11 a.m., you're getting what's called low solar angle light into the back of your eyes. That essentially sets a clock that says, 16 hours from that moment, we're going to release melatonin. And melatonin is obviously the molecule that helps aid the transition to sleep. So that process is very important. So every morning I try and get sunlight into my eyes. Best done without sunglasses and not through a window. Get outside, see the sun before 11 a.m. And for the most part, that's helped a lot of my clients with their sleep. Other things to think about with recovery of these notes. There's things like basic food prep skills, basic shopping and food awareness skills, which we kind of touched on in the food choices. Food and cooking skills, and enough parasympathetic rest and digest activation. Some just other notes on recovery as I'm thinking out loud, and we're doing this pod together. One protocol that I deploy, I have a tendency to try and do too much, and if at any point I feel like I am burnt out, I honor that, because generally it's because I've done one of two things. Either I've overstressed my body or I under recovered, which is a whole nother conversation that we can get into. But the thing that we want to think about in recovery is stressing the body in the right ways, exercise, learning things, mental stress, a good amount. There's good stress, there's bad stress. Obviously, we want to cultivate good stress and help our body adapt, build, learn, grow, etc. So there's the stress component, and then there's the recover component. And if you're overstressed and you're recovering well, you may get by. If you're overstressed and you're under recovered, you're on a path to burnout. If you're under stressed and under recovered, you probably won't feel it. But the goal is to always be stressed. We're talking about exercise, these sort of things. I'm not talking about the stress that you feel from life or whatever it is. We're talking about, stress on your body. So stress, you want a good load, and recover, you want an equal load, right? So it's balancing those two things. So we don't want to be too high. We don't want to be overstressed and under recovered. So always strive for that balance of stress and recovery. And those are kind of my thoughts on that. So if I notice that I'm overstressed, under recovered, take a day, no exercise, prioritize recovery, and then the next day come back a little bit lighter than what I would do normally. And that's just kind of my protocol. But again, think about ways that you could implement that for yourself, whatever that means. If you don't exercise every day like I do, just find what works best. And I'm obviously open to helping people do that if you send me questions, because I would love to chat about it, talk about it, break it down on the podcast. So if you have questions about recovery and stressing your body in the right way, please do reach out. So transitioning now, we got our last 3 bullet points, which is kind of crazy. This has gone by so quick. Life skills, mindset / psychology, and environment. So we'll start with life skills and then we'll get to the other 2. So the sub bullet points under life skills are able to ask for what they want and need, can define clear boundaries with others. That one's big. One tendency of mine that maybe you can learn from, that I'm working on in this continuous process, obviously, is able to ask for what they want and need. So I have a tendency to do everything myself. This is good and bad, but it gets me into trouble when I'm overstressed and I'm overworked. So the amount of work that I have to do is over the load I'm capable of handling. And when that happens, I get really down on myself because I always pride myself on getting things done and, being efficient and effective. And so I think people kind of have a misconception about that with me is that I do love productivity and being productive, and I pride myself on it, but I get really mad at myself and down on myself when I'm not that. When I say that I would do something and I can't do it, that really pisses me off. But I've learned to realize that, okay, what is a better reaction to having said that you would do something and you're no longer able to do it? What is it, getting pissed off and angry and mad at yourself and creating this kind of self-absorbing cycle? Or would it be to step back, maybe ask why that happened in the first place, and then potentially looking at things to get to delegate to other people in ways that I could be even more efficient about it? So that to me has been an exercise that I've been trying to do and just think about because it's a very hard thing. Like once I have my way of doing something, I want it done specifically that way. And so kind of surrendering control to letting other people take care of things that they need to take care of is great. And kind of the second part to that is your ability to ask someone for what you want or need. And I would say the need part is more my problem. Um, I have, another poor tendency of mine is like I won't ask for like what I need because I feel like I can do it and I can figure it out, which is again both good and bad, but something where there's some form of a threshold there where it's important to ask others and talk to other people about how you can get the things that you need to be successful. And in podcasting, writing, and life lately, I've been relying on others and their, feedback to my questions for helping facilitate what I need, and that has been amazing. That has been a very good exercise. So maybe the takeaway on this bullet point is find that personal board of directors, personal mentor board for you that you can go to when you need something slash want something, and they can provide feedback on that and maybe even provide you exactly with what you need. The second part to that first sub bullet point is can you define clear boundaries with others? This, I think, is hinting at the ability to say no and saying yes to no, because there's a difference. That's one thing that I've worked on tremendously in the last, 3 years since coming home from University of Portland, is just working on my ability to say yes to no and like not getting down about it and not feeling like I'm missing out or I'm hurting someone's feelings from it. So, just some things that I think about, saying yes to no. Most of the time, I feel like I'm a very empathetic person, so I feel like I let down people by saying no, but that is not a thought that is very beneficial or productive for me because most of the time when I'm saying yes to no, it's because I'm saying yes to something else that is more closely aligned to my desired health and performance outcomes. So I think the roundabout way of saying this is that one, identify your desirable health and performance outcomes. Health outcomes, if you're just a standard person, performance outcomes in sport and life, etc. Once you have those outcomes identified, it becomes easier to say yes to no or say no to things, right? Um, and I just feel that now that I'm more closely aligned to what I want to do and what I want to see and what I want to be, it's way easier to say no to certain things. And so identify those health and performance outcomes, and this ability will get easier. So moving on to the next sub bullet point, um, making mostly thoughtful and informed choices I apologize about that. That was somebody calling me. I thought I had do not disturb on. Um, Making mostly thoughtful and informed choices. Next sub bullet point is able to organize one's time and schedule reasonably well. And the last bullet point in this life skills is has good options available and convenient. Kind of very general bullets, but I think maybe the take home message for the life skills thing is one thing that I've been thinking about a lot is I think one of the most important life skills is your ability to communicate with others, and not only communicate, but like communicate your like who you really are, like your authentic self. And in an age where technology is becoming more, a part of our society, being your true self and communicating your true self is becoming more rare. And I always strive to do this, and potentially at times I'm not doing it. And I actually don't even know of a good way to like measure whether or not you're, being your true self and communicating it. But I think the best litmus test for it is just, walking away from a conversation or, this podcast even, and being like, am I communicating with myself in the most honest and open way? And if you're doing that, then it's likely your authentic true self. So those would be the things that I think about there. The, sub bullet point to that would be another life skill that I think is, very valuable is like having a schedule. And this we can get into the weeds about, and I'm talking very generally here, so it's hard to, talk about specifics, but maybe one specific we can dive into is I just had a podcast with Bryant Ferrati actually, and one of the take home messages that he had for us and for me that I wrote down was when to what. So it's hard to know what you're going to do if you don't know when you're going to do it. That really resonated with me because if I can block out an hour, it's a lot easier to fill my hour of what I need to do in that hour if I know when I'm going to do it and the constraints that I have on that block of time. So, when to what? Have a schedule, be empathetic, communicate to others, communicate authentically and honestly and openly to others. I think are very important life skills, as well as being able to ask people for help that you need. Saying no, like we talked about, I think are all really important life skills. And again, there are millions of others, and we can get into the weeds on them. But these are just some thoughts that are in my mind right now that I'm getting out on this pod. So, transitioning now to mindset/psychology, able to think uh, on a continuum from worse to better, growth mindset, and consistent. Okay, love all these points, and I think the first thing that I'll lead off with is one of my favorite aspects of being a coach is getting people from saying they can't do something to seeing them actually do it. One of the strategies I deploy as a coach in catalyzing that process is saying yet, anchoring on yet. When a client says, I can't do a pull up, I say yet. That's recognizing that you may not be able to do a pull up now, but it's not eliminating the potential outcome of you doing a pull up sometime in the future. If you just say, I can't do a pull up, then you are limiting your potential ability to do a pull up. So the power of yet has transformed a lot of performance outcomes and I think a lot of lives because some of the kids that I train, they'll catch me saying like I'll just be, shooting the shit or whatever and I will say I can't X, I can't do something or whatever. And they'll be like you can't yet. And I'm like, "Yes, you're right." And I give them a fist bump because that is awesome. So cultivate the power of yet in your life. And that's the bullet point about able to think on a continuum from worse to better. You may not be able to do it now, but don't limit yourself from potentially doing it in the future by having these closed minded statements. Use the power of yet, right? I can't do a pull up yet. I can't go to college yet. I can't be this yet. I can't hit a home run yet, right? Leave the option for you to be able to do it. Don't limit yourself in that regard. Think on of a continuum from worse to better. Growth mindset. The I mean, I don't really know how you specifically engineer a growth mindset. I don't know how it was engineered in myself. I feel like it's just something that's a part of me. And it's easy for me to say, take everything as an opportunity to learn and grow, but I don't know how to implement that in another person's life. And I'm working on like addressing that problem. So I think it's very naive of me to say, just, take everything that happens to you as an opportunity to learn and grow. It's a skill, so you can practice it. Take one, maybe it's this. Maybe you take the smallest piece of adversity that has happened to you or that you're about to encounter or that, you encounter in the future and trying to learn and grow from that little tiny size bit of adversity. So maybe it's like, okay, the next time that you don't want to make your bed, think about how can I learn from this opportunity? Can I make my bed even though I don't want to? Because that, little bit of discomfort where you don't want to make your bed in the morning is in a way adversity. And then if you can overcome that little mini exercise of, okay, I really don't want to make my bed, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's a good thing to do and it's a part of having a productive day, then that skill is going to get extrapolated out to other things in your life. And so I think if you can start at the smallest level and then build up from there, it's going to be a lot easier to adopt this mindset of taking everything as an opportunity to learn and grow in life, whatever's thrown at you. So don't think of it in a macro sense. How can you get incredibly micro with adopting this protocol? How can you get micro focused on taking the micro adversities that you have in your life and then using them to learn and grow? If you can do that at a micro level for a few different things, it will translate to macro level adoption and being able to do it with the big things in life. Next thing, consistency. So I have a couple opinions on this. A year ago, I felt like nobody was talking about consistency, but now I feel like it's a very oversaturated topic. My thoughts are this. Consistency is still the most underrated aspect of becoming great at something and achieving certain desirable health and performance outcomes. It is so important. I always say it matters little unless you continually do it. And that goes for any intervention, right? Or really anything in life. Um, and engineering consistency is a difficult thing, right? It's hard, but I think we can optimize for it at the onset. I actually wrote a Medium post that I'll also link to in the description of this podcast that potentially will shed some light on this topic. But I think a lot of the time people struggle with consistency because they're not optimizing for it. And that's an interesting concept because it's like if you're trying to do something and you say you're just going to do it, like there's no guidelines there. There's no like bowling rails to guide where you're going. Um, and so I think optimizing for consistency habit that I'm implementing into my life, and then answer that honestly. And I think another aspect of consistency that is also overlooked is the size of the intervention that you're looking to take on. I want to run a marathon in under 2 hours and 30 minutes. a very, 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 very large goal and outcome that you're looking to achieve, maybe it's more realistic to, run a marathon first under 4 hours if you haven't done that, achieving that. So just being incredibly realistic with yourself and not limiting your optimism, but expanding on your realism. So being incredibly realistic with yourself will help you adopt and engineer consistency, which is actually going to be an enabling factor in the long run in you running a 2 hour and 30-minute marathon. So I hope that example kind of illustrated that concept. But I would ask you, how can you engineer consistency in your life for whatever intervention and protocol that you're looking to adopt? Whatever that question is for yourself, that's probably the best answer. I can't give you the best answer. That's probably going to be the best answer for you to build off of. Those were the only three sub bullet points in the mindset slash psychology. One thing that I've been thinking about, and I I'm going to write on, but I haven't written on it yet, and maybe hashing it out over a podcast will help. But it has to do with judgment. So I I think that I'm portrayed as a pretty nice person and an empathetic one, in my friends and family's eye. I would like to think so because I really strive to be that. But I also catch myself at times being very quick to judge. And I've gotten a lot more honest with myself about that. And I'm looking to not necessarily change it because at times judgment is actually very important, but removing the needless judgment, the judgment that doesn't, there's no ROI on that judgment. So, like, for an example, at times I'll catch myself casting judgment. When I cast judgment, say like, for example, 2 days ago, I was flying home from Spokane and I had a thought when I saw this person. And the thought was like, this person was obviously very unhealthy, I could see. And I just like thought, like, why the fuck is she unhealthy? That's what I thought. Or more specifically, why the fuck would she do that to herself? And I started like really reflecting on that thought. I didn't say it, I didn't speak it, I didn't tell it to anyone. I just thought that. Like, why did I have that thought? Thoughts come and go as a byproduct of being in the present moment. But what I can change about that statement potentially, if we're just looking at that statement, what's the ROI on that statement for myself and for that person that I was talking about? Why the fuck would she do that to herself? The ROI on that statement, if I say it out loud and to other people, I'm a horrible person because that's a rude thing to say to another human, doesn't really, make me credible in the field of health, wellness, prevention, and longevity, which are fields that I'm fascinated by and want to contribute to. So, really, no ROI there. Okay, now let's go into her shoes. If she hears that, she probably thinks uh, less of herself. That is a very debilitating statement to make. And I am no longer able to help her because I cannot step into her shoes, potentially uh, think about why she's there in the first place, and then provide my 2 cents, maybe guide her and other people like her to better health outcomes, etc. So the ROI on that statement is literally zero. Now, if I were to just, have that thought again, that thought comes up, and instead of just leaving that thought alone, I would consider asking more questions. Leaving that judgment alone, I would consider asking more questions. Now, why is that person where she is or where he is? What enabled this person to get to this point? How did this person get to this specific point? When you start asking more questions and casting less judgment, you're increasing your surface area for empathy because the answers or those questions I'm now thinking about being in that person's shoes. And as soon as you're thinking about that, you're deploying empathy. Empathy has the power to change lives. So the ROI on not casting as much judgment and instead asking questions, let's look at the ROI again. Okay, for myself, return on investment for me is by asking questions, I'm no longer a mean person. So that's good. These questions are clinical questions that researchers are addressing, scientists are addressing. So, potentially by answering or contributing to the solution in these problems, I am furthering the field of health, longevity, performance, etc. That's a plus. Additionally, the I feel better because I feel like I'm contributing to something, like I'm helping spark some change in someone. That's good. Now let's look at the ROI for the person that I was talking about. The ROI for her. Okay, ask a question. She gives an answer. Maybe that answer illuminates something in her that she's now able to go adopt a new protocol, a new habit, a new intervention, and she can live a healthier life. Well, that's fucking amazing. That's great. That's a lot better than judgment, right? Additionally, whatever insight I glean from her, whatever I learned from her or that person, I can now use and extrapolate for other people like that person. Because presumably there's also a lot of people that, I could say, like, why the fuck would you, like, how the fuck did you get there? Whatever my thought was. There's a lot of people like that. And I can now take that data that she gave me and use it to not only make her life potentially better, but lives like hers potentially better. So the whole kind of roundabout idea is that I caught myself judging someone, which I'm sorry for. I feel like I did not need that person did not need my judgment, and that is something that I'm really trying to work on as a person because like I'll be very quick to judge. I won't say anything obviously because again, I'm trying to be nice and empathetic and I'm trying to be a good person, but I think all of us have these like judgments that we're very quick to cast. And I think if we can, you know, not cast the judgments, it's okay to still think them, but not cast them, and then potentially, ask more questions. That process will spur a lot of change and a lot of growth in not only your life, but the people around you and the potential people that you are going to judge. Also, I think judgment in general segregates people, populations, and worlds, maybe. Maybe nations is a better term at this point, but potentially worlds, I don't know. And asking questions facilitates collaboration and working with one another. And I think that is kind of my last insight on the judge less, ask more questions. Don't cast judgment, ask questions. That's one tool that I'm looking to improve in myself. Now, transitioning, and this is our last bullet point. I can't believe that I've been talking for almost an hour. Hopefully, you're still listening. Is environment. So, I've also been doing a lot of thinking about this. The sub bullet point for environment is environment supports goals and reasonable managing stress and life demands. So, I think the environment piece is essential for growing in whatever that you want to do. So, in this class that I'm taking right now, we came across it's a health theory class, and we came across a theory. It's called reciprocal determinism. The theory states you reciprocate whatever or how you reciprocate the environment you inhabit. And that's what it was. Okay, that's pretty powerful. The environment does not reciprocate you, you reciprocate the environment you inhabit. That's consciously and subconsciously. So if you're an organized person, if you have an organized room, an organized place of work, you're likely to be more organized in other areas of life, whether that's a conscious decision or a subconscious decision, right? So your environment, or you reciprocate your environment, right? One of the things that I think about in health and wellness is I think that my parents did an incredibly good job of raising me in an environment that encouraged health, getting after it, being the best you that you can be, and doing all the things that you want to do, which I think is one of the best gifts a parent can give a child, is that environment to learn, cultivate, grow, and be whatever you want to be. I want to work on making better environments for people to do the same thing. If the theory of reciprocal determinism is you inhabit or you reciprocate the environment you inhabit, then a potential solution to the growing adverse health outcomes in America and around the world is cultivating better environments, right? So if we can create better environments that encourage healthier behaviors and thus potentially better health outcomes, and we put people in these environments, maybe not put people is the wrong word, but you know, we put these environments in these people's lives, maybe that's the better way to think about it, and these people reciprocate that environment, then the adverse health outcomes start to decline and the beneficial health outcomes start to rise. Obviously, this is a very theoretical conversation and one that needs to be explored more. And like, I need to think about it more. I need to write about it more. But it's a conversation that I'm very excited to dive into because I think it's incredibly potent, because I think the theory is very true, right? If, like I didn't get, I'm a byproduct of my environment. I choose the people that I surround myself with because, I want to be someone greater, someone better, and whatnot. And so the theory is you reciprocate the environment you inhabit. So a solution to adverse health in America and around the world is helping people build better environments, placing people in better environments, and placing better environments in people's lives. I think that would be dope. And that's a problem that I'm fascinated about and excited to work on. So I think that's about it for this podcast. This was actually kind of fun. It was like a mini thought exercise. Thank you for tuning in if you've listened to me this far. And if you wouldn't mind hitting the subscribe button on YouTube or leaving a rating on the podcast, it helps it grow and impact more people's lives, hopefully. If you wouldn't also mind leaving a comment with one thing you learned or one thing that you would like me to work on, or just a question that you have that I could address in a potential future episode. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to listen to my thoughts, and keep crushing it, team. Cheers.